Commander Vex-Tralon adjusted his ceremonial armor, its purple plates catching the harsh fluorescent lights of the prison transport. 3 moons into his assignment as chief interrogator for the Galactic Dominion's 73rd Fleet, and he still couldn't believe the absurdity of his current situation. A human. A single, solitary human. "Status report!" Vex barked into his comm unit, his 4 eyes focusing on the reinforced containment cell ahead. "Sir, the prisoner remains uncooperative," came the nervous reply from Lieutenant Vex-Tralon. "We've tried standard intimidation protocols, sleep deprivation, sensory manipulation, temperature extremes. The creature just sits there, making those disturbing facial expressions." Vex's mandibles clicked in annoyance. "Facial expressions? It keeps showing its teeth, sir." "We believe it's a threat display." Vex couldn't help but feel a mixture of professional curiosity and personal frustration. In his 47 years of service to the Dominion, he'd broken the will of Kentaran battle priests, Morgothian death cultists, and even a particularly stubborn crystalloid hive queen. But this human, this unremarkable bipedal mammal from a backwater planet called Earth, was proving to be something entirely different. The transport shuddered as it docked with the interrogation station orbiting the dead world of Proxima 7. Through the viewport, Vex could see the skeletal remains of what had once been a thriving colony world. The humans called it negotiating from a position of strength. The Dominion called it setting an example. "Bring the prisoner to Interrogation Base 7, Vex commanded, straightening his ceremonial cape. "And, Lieutenant, make sure the gravity generators are set to standard Dominion levels." Just one thing before we begin. YouTube tells me 94.3% of you watching aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free. It really supports the channel, and you'll get more amazing HFY sci-fi stories delivered straight to you. Don't miss out. I want this creature to feel every ounce of pressure we can legally apply. The containment cell hissed open with a pneumatic wheeze. Inside, sitting cross-legged on the bare metal floor, was the human. Vex had studied the species profile extensively, but seeing one in person was underwhelming. No natural armor, no visible weaponry, no intimidating size or obvious predatory features. Just pale skin, brown hair, and those peculiar small eyes that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. The human looked up as 4 Dominion guards entered the cell. Each guard stood nearly 8 feet tall, their exoskeletons gleaming with built-in weapon systems. The human smiled. "Morning, boys," the creature said in perfect galactic standard. "Ready for another round of 20 questions?" Guard Captain Tor Valdris stepped forward, his plasma rifle humming with barely contained energy. "Prisoner designation, Earth 779. You will stand and prepare for transport." The human stretched, joints popping audibly. Vex noticed that several of the guards flinched at the sound. Curious. "You know," the human said, slowly rising to his feet. "Back home, we have this saying. 3rd time's the charm. Today makes 3 days you've been trying to break me." The creature's lips curved upward again. "I'm starting to think you fellows might not be as tough as advertised." Vex watched through the security feed as his elite guards actually took a step backward. The human was barely 5.5 feet tall, weighed perhaps 160 in standard units, and was completely unarmed. Yet somehow, his mere presence seemed to unsettle trained soldiers who had conquered 17 star systems. "Sir?" Lieutenant Vex whispered into the comm. "Should we sedate the prisoner? Its behavior patterns are unusual." "Negative," Vex replied, his curiosity overriding protocol. I want to observe its natural reactions. The human was escorted through the station's corridors, and Vex noted something interesting. The creature's head moved constantly, scanning, cataloging, memorizing, not with the frantic desperation of a trapped animal, but with the methodical precision of a professional soldier conducting reconnaissance. 20 minutes later, Vex stood outside Interrogation Bay 7, reviewing the prisoner's file one final time. According to Dominion intelligence, this human had been captured during the initial bombardment of a minor orbital station. No significant military rank, no special clearance, just a maintenance technician named Marcus Webb who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or so the reports claimed. Vex activated the bay's environmental controls, flooding the chamber with the thick, sulfurous atmosphere preferred by most Dominion species. The gravity increased to twice Earth standard. The temperature dropped to just above freezing. Psychological warfare at its finest. The human was shackled to a restraint chair in the center of the room, yet somehow managed to appear completely relaxed. As Vex entered the chamber, the creature actually had the audacity to nod in greeting. "Commander," Marcus said pleasantly. "Nice digs you've got here. Very ominous. I particularly appreciate the dramatic lighting. Really sets the mood for intimidation and whatnot." Vex felt his primary stomachs clench with irritation. 3 days of reports had not prepared him for the human's casual demeanor. This creature should be cowering in terror, begging for mercy, offering classified information in exchange for a quick death. Instead, it was making conversation. "I am Commander Vex-Tralon of the Galactic Dominion's 73rd Fleet," Vex announced, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems. "You will address me as Your Excellence or Commander. You will answer all questions with complete honesty. You will show proper respect for the authority of the Dominion." Marcus tilted his head slightly, considering this. "Huh. That's a lot of you wills there, Commander. Mind if I ask what happens if I don't?" Vex activated his personal holoprojector. The air above them filled with images of burning worlds, destroyed fleets, the systematic extermination of entire species. The greatest hits of Dominion conquest, carefully curated for maximum psychological impact. 1,200 species have knelt before the Dominion, Vex intoned. 1,200 civilizations have learned the price of defiance. Your species will be the 1,201st. Marcus watched the display with apparent interest, occasionally nodding as if approving of particularly effective destruction. When the presentation ended, he looked back at Vex with those unsettling small eyes. "Not bad," Marcus said, "though I have to say, your special effects budget could use some work. That bit with the exploding space station looked a little fake. Too much orange in the fireball. Real explosions in vacuum are more white-hot, you know." Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sure sign of mounting anger. "You find the destruction of civilizations amusing, human." "Oh, not at all," Marcus replied, his tone becoming more serious. "I just find it interesting that you feel the need to show me a highlight reel. Back where I come from, when someone's really dangerous, they don't need to prove it with a slideshow." The silence that followed was broken only by the steady hum of the station's life support systems. Vex found himself studying the human more carefully. There was something about the creature's posture, its breathing patterns, the way its eyes tracked movement. This was not the behavior of a simple maintenance worker. "State your full name, rank, and assignment," Vex commanded. "Marcus Allen Webb," the human replied without hesitation. "Petty Officer 2nd Class, United States Navy. Currently assigned to Deep Space Monitoring Station Tango 77, as a communications specialist. Vex cross-referenced this information with his files. Everything matched perfectly. Too perfectly. In his experience, prisoners under extreme stress rarely remembered such details with clockwork precision. You claim to be a communications specialist, yet you were found in an engineering section. Marcus shrugged, the metal restraints creaking slightly. Cross-training. Navy likes us to be versatile. You never know when you might need to fix a plasma conduit or rewire a sensor array. Keeps things interesting. And what exactly were you doing when our forces boarded your station? Honestly. I was trying not to die, Marcus said with that unsettling smile again. Your boys came in shooting first and asking questions never. Not exactly standard boarding protocol, but I suppose intimidation works better than politeness. Vex circled the restraint chair slowly, his talons clicking against the metal deck plating. You seem remarkably calm for someone facing interrogation by a superior military force. Well, Marcus said thoughtfully, I figure there are 3 possibilities here. 1, you're going to kill me, regardless of what I say, in which case there's no point in getting worked up about it. 2, you actually need information from me, which means I have something you want, which gives me negotiating power. Or 3, this whole thing is some kind of elaborate misunderstanding, and we'll all have a good laugh about it later. And which do you believe is most likely? Honestly? Option 2. Marcus leaned forward as much as the restraints allowed. See, if you just wanted me dead, you wouldn't have bothered with the fancy prison transport, the specialized interrogation facility, or the dramatic presentation. You'd have just spaced me with the rest of the station crew. But here I am, alive, and relatively comfortable, which tells me I have something you need. Vex felt a chill run through his exoskeleton that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. The human's analysis was not only correct, it demonstrated a level of tactical thinking that contradicted every piece of intelligence they had on the species. What makes you think the rest of your crew is dead? For the first time since the interrogation began, Marcus's expression shifted. The casual confidence flickered, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. Because, Marcus said quietly, that's what I would have done. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Vex found himself reassessing everything about this prisoner. The casual manner, the apparent cooperation, the detailed knowledge of military protocols. Either this human was far more than it appeared to be, or the Dominion had drastically underestimated the entire species. You speak as if you have experience with military operations, Petty Officer Webb. Marcus's smile returned, but this time it held no warmth whatsoever. Commander, I've been in the Navy for 12 years, 4 deployments to active conflict zones, 2 classified operations I can't talk about, and 1 classified operation I definitely can't talk about. You think monitoring deep space communications is all I know how to do? Vex activated his personal shield generator, a precaution that suddenly seemed very necessary. What exactly are you implying, human? I'm not implying anything, Marcus said. I'm stating facts. You captured what you thought was a helpless communications technician from a research station. Instead, you've got a trained military operator who's been watching your security procedures, studying your guard rotations, and cataloging every weakness in this facility for the past 72 hours. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Vex's secondary eyes darted to the security console, confirming that all systems were functioning normally. Yet, somehow, he felt as if the balance of power had shifted without him noticing. You are restrained, unarmed, and outnumbered by a factor of approximately 3,000 to 1, Vex pointed out. What possible threat could you represent? Marcus Webb, Petty Officer 2nd Class, United States Navy, looked up at the 8-foot-tall, armored, heavily armed alien commander who held his life in his hands. And he laughed. It wasn't a hysterical laugh, or a desperate one. It was the kind of laugh a man makes when he's just heard a particularly good joke. Rich, genuine, and utterly without fear. "Commander," Marcus said when he'd recovered his composure, "has anyone ever told you about the United States Marine Corps?" Vex consulted his mental database. "A subdivision of your planet's military forces, primitive kinetic weapons, limited space capability, numerically insignificant compared to Dominion standards." "That's right," Marcus nodded approvingly. "And do you know what Marines are famous for, Commander?" Despite himself, Vex found himself drawn into the human's conversational trap. Elaborate. "Marines," Marcus said, his voice taking on an almost reverent tone, "are famous for doing the impossible with inadequate resources under impossible circumstances. And do you know what the unofficial motto of the Marine Corps is?" Vex remained silent, though his mandibles clicked with growing unease. "Improvise, adapt, overcome," Marcus quoted. "See, you made one critical error in your assessment of humanity, Commander. You looked at our technology, our numbers, our apparent limitations, and you thought you understood what you were dealing with, but you missed the most important thing about humans. Which is—" Marcus Webb smiled again, and this time Vex recognized the expression for what it truly was. Not a threat display, not a sign of submission or fear. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized his prey had walked directly into his trap. "We don't know when to quit." The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in 3 seconds later, bathing the interrogation chamber in blood-red illumination. Alarms began wailing throughout the station. Vex's comm unit crackled with panicked reports from across the facility. "Security breach in Section 7! Unknown explosion in the primary power grid. Commander, we have multiple system failures across all decks." And in the center of the chamber, Marcus Webb remained exactly where he had been, still securely restrained, still smiling that terrible smile. "How?" Vex demanded. "Like I said, Commander," Marcus replied conversationally. 12 years in the Navy. You learn a few things about electronics, about timing, about exploiting weaknesses in complex systems. 3 days is a long time to study your security protocols." Vex's training took over. He activated his personal comm, barking orders to damage control teams while simultaneously calling for additional security. But in the back of his mind, a cold certainty was growing. This was not a malfunction. This was not an accident. This was sabotage, planned and executed with surgical precision by a prisoner who should have been helpless. "Explain how you accomplished this while restrained," Vex ordered. "Well," Marcus said thoughtfully, "remember how your boys were so concerned about me making those disturbing facial expressions? Turns out, when you smile and frown and move your jaw around, it generates tiny electrical impulses. And if you happen to know exactly which frequencies to generate, and you happen to be sitting in a chair that's directly connected to the station's main power grid through those shackles." Vex stared at the restraint chair with new understanding. The energy-dampening fields, the neural inhibitors, the direct connection to the station's central computer core. All designed to keep a prisoner helpless and monitored. All turned into a weapon by someone who understood the system better than its creators. "You've been transmitting signals through the restraint system," Vex breathed. For 3 days, Marcus confirmed. Took me a while to figure out your electrical standards, but once I had the basic parameters, it was just a matter of finding the right exploits. Your computer security is impressive, but it's designed to keep out external threats. Nobody thought to protect against attacks originating from inside the system itself. The station shuddered as another explosion echoed through the hull. Vex's tactical display showed cascade failures across multiple decks. Life support was holding, but barely. Weapons systems were offline, and most critically, the communication array was completely dead. Marcus Webb, maintenance technician turned saboteur, had just crippled a state-of-the-art Dominion military installation using nothing but facial muscles and a basic understanding of electronics. "What do you want?" Vex asked. "Want?" Marcus seemed genuinely surprised by the question. "Commander, I think you've got this backwards. I'm not the one making demands here. You are. I don't understand." "You told me to bow," Marcus said simply. "You said I had to show proper respect for the authority of the Dominion. You wanted me to kneel before your superior military force." His expression became serious, almost sad. "But here's the thing about Americans, Commander. We've got this weird quirk in our psychology. The harder you try to make us submit, the more we resist. It's like a genetic defect or something." Vex felt his grip on the situation slipping away entirely. "You've sabotaged a military installation as a gesture of defiance?" "Oh no," Marcus said quickly. "I sabotaged your installation because it was the tactically sound response to being captured and interrogated. The defiance is just a bonus." Another alarm joined the cacophony as hull breach warnings began echoing through the station. Vex's worst fears were confirmed when his engineering officer's voice crackled through the comm. "Commander, we have massive structural failures in the outer ring. The cascade is accelerating. We need to evacuate immediately." Vex looked down at the human prisoner who had just destroyed his command with nothing but patience and ingenuity. "You're going to die here with the rest of us." Marcus shrugged. "Probably. But at least I'll die standing up." For the first time in his 47 years of military service, Commander Vex-Tralon of the Galactic Dominion's 73rd Fleet found himself facing an enemy he didn't understand. An enemy that couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be broken, and apparently couldn't be stopped. An enemy that would rather die than kneel. And as the station began its final death spiral into the gravity well of Proxima 7, Vex realized that the Dominion had made a critical error in its assessment of humanity. They had assumed that a technologically inferior species would be easily conquered. They had never considered the possibility that some species might be too stubborn to realize when they were beaten. The evacuation alarm cut through the chaos like a blade through flesh. Commander Vex-Tralon's mandibles clicked frantically as damage reports flooded his comm system. 17 decks compromised. Main power offline. Navigation systems failing. All because of one human who was currently sitting in a chair, looking remarkably pleased with himself. "Sir?" Lieutenant Crix's voice crackled through the static. "Escape pods are launching from sections 4 through 9. We have maybe 6 minutes before structural collapse reaches the command deck." Vex stared at Marcus Webb, who was humming something under his breath. Actually, humming. As if the imminent destruction of a 3 billion credit military installation was somehow amusing. "You realize," Vex said slowly, "that your escape pods were destroyed in the initial bombardment of your station. You have no way off this facility." Marcus stopped humming and looked up with genuine curiosity. "Escape pods?" "Commander, who said anything about escaping?" The question hit Vex like a physical blow. In all his years of military service, In all his encounters with desperate prisoners and cornered enemies, he had never met anyone who seemed genuinely unconcerned about their own survival. It was unnatural. "You're not trying to escape?" "Nope." Marcus tested his restraints again, more out of habit than hope. "See, here's the thing about being Navy. They don't just teach you how to fight ships, they teach you how to sink them. And right now, this station is broadcasting a very specific distress signal on a very specific frequency." Vex's blood chilled. "What frequency?" "Well, that would be telling," Marcus said with a grin. "But let's just say that when a U.S. Navy communications specialist goes missing, certain people tend to notice. Certain people with access to certain resources." The station lurched violently as another support beam gave way. Through the reinforced viewport, Vex could see debris spinning away into the void. His tactical display showed the death spiral accelerating. They had minutes, maybe less. "Commander!" The voice belonged to Guard Captain Tor Valdris. "Evacuation shuttles are standing by. We need to move now." Vex looked at the human one last time. "Any final words, Petty Officer Webb?" Marcus considered this seriously. "Yeah, actually. Tell your fleet commanders something for me. Tell them that what happened here. This isn't even our military. This is just one guy with basic training and a stubborn streak. Tell them to imagine what our actual soldiers are like." Despite everything, despite the imminent destruction and the strategic disaster, Vex found himself asking, "And what are they like?" Marcus Webb's smile became something altogether different, something that made Vex's exoskeleton crawl with primitive fear. "They're Marines." The restraint chair's release mechanism was designed to respond only to authorized Dominion personnel. It required specific biometric signatures, encrypted command codes, and a minimum of 2 officers for activation. It was absolutely foolproof, which was why Vex was so surprised when the shackles simply clicked open. Marcus stretched his arms with obvious relief, working circulation back into his fingers. "Thanks for that. By the way, 3 days in that thing was starting to get uncomfortable." "How?" Vex demanded, his weapon half drawn. "Remember that cascade failure I mentioned?" Marcus stood up, rolling his shoulders. "Turns out, when a station's main computer starts having a nervous breakdown, it tends to revert to basic safety protocols. Emergency unlock for all restraint systems. Standard procedure to prevent prisoners from being trapped during evacuation." Vex drew his plasma rifle fully, the weapon's targeting system painting a red dot on Marcus's chest. "You will remain exactly where you are." "Or what?" Marcus asked reasonably. "You'll shoot me?" "Commander, we're both going to be dead in about 4 minutes anyway. What's the point?" The logic was unassailable, which made it even more infuriating. Vex kept his weapon trained on the human while backing toward the exit. "You're coming with me." "Actually, I'm not. I am ordering you to accompany me to the evacuation shuttles." Marcus walked to the chamber's main console and began examining the control interfaces. "And I'm politely declining your order. See, I've got work to finish here." The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Vex's comm unit was squawking with increasingly desperate evacuation calls. Every instinct told him to run, to preserve his own life and worry about the implications later. But professional curiosity and growing dread kept him frozen in place. "What work?" Marcus's fingers danced across the console with surprising familiarity. "Well, your computer core is still partially functional. And I've got about 3 minutes to download everything I can about Dominion fleet positions, troop strengths, tactical doctrines, and strategic objectives." The blood drained from Vex's face, which was quite a feat for a creature with purple skin. Those files are encrypted with quantum-level security protocols. Yep, Marcus's. Hands never stopped moving. Good thing I've had 3 days to study your encryption methods. Amazing what you can learn when you're bored and have nothing but time. Vex raised his rifle. Step away from that console. Marcus glanced over his shoulder. Commander, you've got maybe 2 minutes before this section collapses. You can waste time threatening me, or you can run for your shuttle and live to fight another day. Your choice. It was the most sensible advice Vex had ever received from a prisoner. It was also completely unacceptable. The intelligence contained in that computer core represented decades of strategic planning. If it fell into human hands, I cannot allow you to access those files. Then shoot me, Marcus said simply. But understand something first. Even if you kill me, even if you destroy this console, the damage is already done. See, those facial expressions your boys were so worried about? I wasn't just sabotaging your station. I was transmitting data. Vex felt the deck plates vibrating beneath his feet as structural supports failed throughout the facility. Transmitting to whom? Ever hear of burst transmission protocols, Commander? Compress years of intelligence data into microsecond packets, bounce them off natural radio sources, scatter them across multiple frequencies. Marcus pulled a memory core from the console and slipped it into his pocket. 3 days of patient work, and now every piece of information about your fleet movements, your supply lines, your strategic objectives. All of it is currently racing toward Earth at the speed of light. The implications hit Vex like a meteor impact. This wasn't sabotage. This wasn't even espionage. This was intelligence warfare at a level that should have been impossible for a primitive species to comprehend, let alone execute. You're not a maintenance technician, Vex said quietly. Nope. Marcus checked his chronometer. 90 seconds, Commander. Better run. Vex's training warred with his survival instincts. He could shoot the human, but it would accomplish nothing. The data was already transmitted. The station was already doomed. His only rational choice was to evacuate and deal with the consequences later. Instead, he asked the question that had been nagging at him for 3 days. What are you really? Marcus Webb turned away from the console and looked directly at the 8-foot-tall alien warrior who could have crushed him without effort. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the casual humor or strategic calculation that had defined their interactions. It was the voice of a professional soldier delivering a battlefield assessment. My name is Marcus Allen Webb, Master Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, Naval Intelligence Specialist, First Class, graduate of the Navy's Advanced Electronic Warfare School, the Joint Special Operations Command, and 3 programs so classified I can't even tell you their names. He paused. And for the past 18 months, I've been undercover aboard Deep Space Monitoring Station Tango 77, waiting for someone exactly like you to show up. The words hung in the air like an unexploded bomb. Vex felt his world rearranging itself as the implications sank in. The station was bait, Marcus confirmed. See, our intelligence services figured out something interesting about the Dominion. You folks have a pattern. Find an isolated target, overwhelm it with superior force, take prisoners for interrogation, then use the intel to plan your next move. Very efficient, very predictable. The crew. Volunteers. Every last one of them. Marcus's expression became grim. 18 people who knew they probably weren't coming home, but believed the intelligence we'd gather would save millions of lives down the line. Vex staggered backward, as if physically struck. You sacrificed your own people? We gave them a choice, Marcus corrected. Same choice every soldier makes when they put on the uniform. Same choice I made when I volunteered for this mission. The station groaned around them, metal stressed beyond its limits. 60 seconds, maybe less. Vex found himself asking questions he didn't want answered. How long have you known about the Dominion? About 5 years. Took us a while to figure out your expansion patterns, your strategic objectives, your technological capabilities. But once we did, Marcus shrugged. Well, let's just say Earth has been preparing. Preparing how? Marcus smiled that terrible smile one final time. Commander, did you really think a species that fought 2 world wars, survived multiple nuclear standoffs, and sent explorers to hostile environments just for the fun of it would roll over when aliens showed up? 30 seconds. The deck was tilting now as the station's structural integrity collapsed. Emergency lighting flickered and died. In the red glow of backup power, Marcus Webb looked less like a prisoner and more like an avenging angel. Your fleet is walking into a trap, Vex realized. Your fleet walked into a trap the moment they decided to threaten Earth. Marcus checked his chronometer again. 15 seconds, Commander. Last chance to evacuate. Vex looked at the human who had just destroyed everything he thought he knew about warfare, intelligence, and the supposed superiority of the Galactic Dominion. A human who was about to die for his convictions, rather than surrender them. Why? Vex asked desperately. Why do this? Why sacrifice everything for a species that hasn't even been contacted yet? Marcus Webb, Master Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, looked at the alien commander who still didn't understand what he was dealing with. Because, Marcus said quietly, someone has to stand watch. The station's final structural collapse began with a sound like the universe tearing itself apart. Vex ran for the evacuation shuttles, his mind reeling with the intelligence, catastrophe he had just witnessed. Behind him, Marcus Webb stood at attention in the collapsing interrogation chamber, saluting no one and nothing except the idea that some principles were worth dying for. The last thing Vex saw before the emergency blast doors slammed shut was the human, standing straight and tall as his world ended around him. 67 minutes later, Vex's evacuation shuttle reached the Dominion fleet. He delivered his report to Fleet Admiral Karn Tethys in person, watching the color drain from his superior's face as the implications became clear. How much intelligence was compromised? The Admiral asked. All of it, sir. Fleet positions, supply routes, strategic objectives, technological specifications. Everything. And the human? Dead, sir. Lost with the station. Admiral Karn Tethys studied the tactical displays showing the Dominion's carefully planned assault on the Sol system. Plans that were now worthless. Strategies that had been anticipated. Technology that had been analyzed and countered. Sir, Vex said quietly, I recommend we reconsider our approach to this species. Elaborate. Vex thought of Marcus Webb, standing alone in a collapsing station, choosing death over submission. Sir, I don't think we're dealing with a primitive civilization. I think we're dealing with a species that has been preparing for war since before we knew they existed. The Admiral nodded grimly. Send a message to the High Command. Tell them we need to reassess our intelligence on the human species. He paused. And tell them to be very, very careful. If one human can do this much damage, sir, I don't want to find out what their military can do. 3 months later, when the Dominion's grand invasion fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system, they found it defended not by primitive kinetic weapons and limited space capability, but by technologies that shouldn't have existed, tactics that anticipated every move, and a species that had spent 5 years preparing for exactly this moment. The humans, it turned out, had learned well from Master Chief Marcus Webb's final lesson. Sometimes, the best way to win a war is to make the enemy believe they've already won. And sometimes, the most important victory is the one that costs everything. In the end, Marcus Webb's sacrifice became the foundation of humanity's greatest triumph. Not because he lived to see it, but because he died believing in it. The Dominion never did learn to make humans bow. They never figured out that some species would rather break than bend.